Baldur's Gate 3 revolves around solving problems, whether it's through turn-based combat, character dialogues, or puzzles. You get to decide how you want to progress, but not always is the most interesting option the one that you find first. And once you've found out how to solve something, you might get stuck thinking that it's the only way because of your prior experience overwhelming your inquisitive or creative problem solving. I know that personally this happens to me a lot, and I get stuck using the same strategies that I'm comfortable with every single time. So I wanted to force myself to play the game in a way that would require more exploration of my options to find the solution. And that is to play the game with only one character instead of a full party of 4.
Get out of here!
Because the game is balanced around many different playstyles being viable, if you're trying to win a fight, you can often do so very easily in most situations with a 4-character party. This ends up being a little bit too easy and often promotes just brute forcing any conflict you get into with your group of 4. With one character, however, many fights will just instantly kill you. You need to pick your fights, use the terrain as your advantage, kite, use consumables, enlist the aid of any non-companion characters, and sometimes just persuade your enemies not to fight you. To answer the question of whether this playstyle is even possible, it absolutely is, because Larian most likely intends a pacifist playthrough to be possible. Then just having one character should also be possible, since you could just put charisma on one character and they do all the talking. So that's it. It's possible. Just avoid combat and win your dice rolls for dialogues. You can beat the game. Well, that's not really the fun part of the game, at least to me. The different classes and combat scenarios are what makes the game fun, so certainly I would need to take on some fights, if not all of them. At this point, you're probably thinking that difficulty settings are going to be very relevant for this. Some players certainly will turn down the difficulty to story mode and just breeze through everything with one character. And that's probably a great idea for a first playthrough for people who don't like being constantly bothered by the other characters who want to suck your blood, or to tell you their life story, or ask for sex, or to try to shame you for your decisions when you're just trying to get a good night's sleep at camp. But for others, the drama that having 4 origin characters in your party will create will be the content. So the ideal playthrough, to me, is still using 4 party members, but turning the difficulty up to maximum for the most complex experience. But there's also potentially an honor mode, which is basically hardcore permadeath with no save scumming. But since we're in early access, we still don't know 100% what options will be available on launch. In Divinity Original Sin 2, you had a bunch of options to choose from. Of those options was actually to use only 2 characters instead of 4, but they would have double the stats and skills, and this was called being Lone Wolf. I rarely enjoyed Lone Wolf playthroughs because it removed the class identity from having 4 party members. It lowered your potential synergies, and while it could be risky if one of your characters dies because you lost half your party, generally it made your 2 characters really tanky, so positioning wasn't as important. Larian has not said anything about including a Lone Wolf option in Baldur's Gate 3 on the full release, and the harder difficulty isn't available yet, so for now, I'll just play Lone Wolf without any of those advantages and see how it goes. So here's my Gold Dwarf Druid, Cyndia. I wanted to try out a more spellcaster druid approach as a Circle of the Land druid, because even though I don't get access to bear form from Circle of the Moon, I'll get much more utility to make up for the fact that I am the only party member, and having access to Guidance cantrip will allow me to win a lot more dice rolls, and since we can't just tank every fight with the support of our allies, I'll need to take a more ranged approach anyways. By the way, there will be some decent spoilers for Act 1 because I'll be going over my journey.
Pain is proof that we live. Revel in it.
I start out on the airship, and after being accosted by Lae'zel, I push her off the ship. Bye. Since I'm a strong independent dwarf who don't need no companion, I'll be going solo. And of course, when given the opportunity to free Shadowheart, I'll pass. Yeah, we'll never see her again anyways, right? Now, the first real fight of the tutorial isn't really supposed to be a fight, but to teach you how to choose your fights. But even as a solo player, I haven't learned this yet. So I try to fight, but get destroyed. By the way, as far as saving goes, I'll try to let actions that happen be permanent, so long as I just don't get a game over. This isn't a permadeath run, but I'll probably need to load a lot anyways because I'll be dying quite a bit, as you can see. If you're not up to the challenge, then maybe you're just not a lone wolf. And if you can't take responsibility for your actions, maybe just stick to being an Oathbreaker paladin. So I decided to be a bit more tactical the next time and go for the console instead of fighting. We get out of the ship and can begin our journey. The first bandit encounter is pretty rough because I still haven't become accustomed to my druid's playstyle, or even what the best strategy for soloing while outnumbered is. But I very quickly realized that the spider wild shape has a web ability with a pretty long range that only costs a bonus action, so I can easily split the enemy characters by deciding who I want to web, and then kiting backwards so that the faster enemies attack me one by one, while the slowed ones are still catching up. Also, while in any wild shape, I have a separate health bar, which makes me a bit tankier, which can really help when you aren't supported by allies. Now, this was very effective, but I soon realized that having only one character means that your ability to use spells is going to be way more limited. With 4 characters, you could have one dedicated to using the utility spells, one to damage spells. I need to use all of them on one character, and since I don't have unlimited usage of my spells, I'm going to run out very often. So I need to loot everything to get my supplies to be able to rest very often. And for some fights, I might even need to rest in the middle of the fight, so I need to get out of combat. And I also realized very quickly that while solo, things can get out of control with one simple CC on you. If an enemy puts you to sleep, that's 100% of your team gone for that round. And you can instantly die in one round if your positioning isn't great. So maybe we don't go to the mausoleum just yet. Instead, I go to the Druid Grove that's under attack by goblins, because that's where I belong as a druid. Will comes to the rescue, but I don't think he realizes he's there by himself. I'm not risking it for him, so he's just gonna die. But that's fine, because as I said, we don't need any companions. Well, maybe not a companion, but a pet. Yeah, as soon as I get to level 2 spells, I can use the Flaming Orb, which gives me another character to control and to use as a tank while I stay further back. It's a summon, not a companion. This still counts as a lone wolf, right? The orb is pretty overpowered at first because it's so tanky and just burns everything near it, but there's one issue. Keeping the orb summoned requires concentration, so I can't use any other powerful land druid spells that require concentration at the same time, and if I get hit, there's a chance I lose concentration. So I need to manage positioning well so that enemies go for the orb, and I just pick off any who stray from the pack. It seems to work really well in the Blighted Village when using line of sight strategically. But this all changes when I head into the spider cave. These phase spiders are very unhinged. They can basically break the game by porting through walls, so line of sight isn't going to work, and although my orb is very effective here, I can't keep it up because the spiders just rush me and break my concentration. Oh, and the big broodmother hits pretty hard. As a lone wolf, you need to take advantage of everything you can get. Some fights you can gain an advantage by doing other events, exploiting a weakness, or denying them a strength. And it's not always needed to do this a lot of the time, so you'll miss out by brute forcing. But as a lone wolf, I need to take every opportunity for an advantage. So sneaking around before the fight and killing off the hatchlings so the broodmother can't wake them up during the fight helped quite a bit. Then I could bait the spiders onto the web pathings and then burn the bridge while they're on it to give them fall damage. Terrain is super important because you can shove enemies for basically one-shot kills. and in this case, the Thunder Wave spell will allow me to knock multiple enemies if I position well. It's a bit overpowered, but enemies can do it to you too. Now I go into the Goblin Village to save Halsin, but when I try to open the cage, he pretends to not know me. I thought we were Druid bros, bro. I try to save him, but in a freak accident, a chandelier falls and Halsin dies. So Halsin is just dead. The Druid playthrough has been soiled. I won't be able to return to the Grove with their leader, and I will never be able to romance Halsin while we're both in wild shape form.
Huh?
But you know what? It's pretty nice to be able to just play the game without the drama of other characters. So it is what it is. The Goblin Village is quite interesting because you can go in full guns blazing, or you can sneak in and convince them to like you. But since I want to test out the combat, I can't just do the pacifist route. So I went for something in between. I snuck in, but slowly baited all the leaders out of their safe territory. You can convince Minthara to attack the Druid Grove, and this not only allows you to fight a bunch of the goblins from the camp in a more controlled environment, but it also gives you some allies from the Grove to help you. These NPCs aren't freshly spawned, they exist in the village, and as part of this event, they move over here. So if I kill them here, they won't be in the village anymore. Then I can go back to the village later and finish off the job. But for now, we need to defend the Grove. Zevlor gives a motivational speech, but I've already got my plan set in motion. There are a bunch of oil barrels placed around the wall, so I go into the Rothe wild shape, which is like an ox, to be able to pick up the oil barrels, because in dwarf form, my strength stat is very low, but as an ox, it's very high. That's another benefit to being a druid in a solo run. That versatility with the wild shapes allows some creative solutions. So we start out blowing up a ton of the goblins, and then take out the rest of them using our positioning advantage. Unfortunately, without a 4-man party, we don't have enough presence to keep Zevlor alive, and unfortunately, we'll witness another of our allies die. So this is the true lone wolf experience, watching your friends die and there's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is. But now that we've culled away some of the goblin forces, there's a good opportunity to take their village head on. Using the spider wild shape, which is by the way my favorite form, I'm able to leap around and avoid being caught by the entire village. But then I realize a really effective strategy. I lure enemies down a choke point, summon the flaming orb, and then from a distance keep spawning webs with the spider, which will immediately be set on fire by the flaming orb, essentially creating a path of fire that they need to run through to get to me. So it's basically like playing Divinity Original Sin again. This strategy keeps me safe from losing concentration, but also does quite heavy damage and confuses the enemies because they're coded to avoid fire, but it's everywhere. So some of them just stay back, while others who are in the fire unsuccessfully chase me down. This is also possible because all I need to do is use my bonus action to create webs, and then I can use my action to dash to keep distance. This is definitely an interesting strategy that I maybe never would have discovered if I had a full party. After this, I was feeling pretty overpowered, so I went to take on the Githyanki patrol, but reality set in quickly. They just didn't care about my flaming orb at all. They jumped up and assaulted me, and I could barely get distance to use my Path of Fire strategy because of how fast they were. I decided to get to level 5 before trying it again, so I went to the secret Zentarum hideout, and I realized a very striking resemblance to the Lone Wolf camp from Divinity Original Sin 2. Yup, these guys are the lone wolves of this game, but they've broken their oath. They're not lone at all, they're grouping together. So I needed to right this wrong by killing them all. The Path of Fire strategy worked perfectly, and even without my flaming orb, there are torches throughout the hideout that serve the same purpose as my orb. If I just put my web down on the torch, it will set on fire, and then I can spread the flame further by adding more web to it. And since we've purged all the fake lone wolves from this place, this is my hideout now. I got to level 5, which allows me to use level 3 spell slots, but I had an idea to kite the Githyanki patrol all the way to the burning village, and it worked. Not only did some of the Githyanki come in at different times, but the Flaming Fist also decided to help me. I, being a helpless pedestrian, was totally being chased by these evil Githyanki, and it totally wasn't instigated by me at all. Usually this is where I would say I've proved my point, that the entire game is definitely possible to solo, so long as you don't mind breaking a few oaths. But I wanted to go even further. I wanted to go into the Underdark. There are some Minotaurs down here, and they can be very dangerous with their rushing attacks. But hey, look, that's where the Broodmother fell from earlier. Why don't we try that again? Yeah, nothing a little knockback can't solve. Shit! Get me another invis potion now! Stat! Is that a bonus action? Yeah, bonus action. There we go, dude. There we go. Do it again, dude. Do it again. After telepathically talking to some mind-reading mushrooms, I am told to go kill some dwarves. But these aren't just any dwarves, they're Dwergar, which are just dark dwarves. And like any fantasy world, racism is alive and well. Our Sinja has no issues taking out these dwarves just because she was told to by some strangers she met not even 10 minutes ago. But here is where I realize the absolute power of the level 3 spell, Call Lightning. It takes only one spell slot to enable it, and then I can keep casting it every turn so long as I keep my concentration. And I found some really nice boots that allow me to click my heels to use my bonus action as a dash. So I can keep my distance with my bonus action and then blast them with a heavy damage spell every turn. It's kind of concerning how powerful your characters become at this point in the game, because just with one character, the combos can already be ridiculously strong. But with 4, it would be even more out of control. Once again, we'll see with higher difficulties how it feels, but for now we'll be disposing of these dwarves and stealing their boat. But they don't take kindly to that, and we get into a boat battle, which doesn't look good for me because I've got nowhere to kite to. But luckily this game is very well designed, and using a Void Bulb consumable will definitely not pull them off their ship into the water and drown because dwarves can't swim, right? Huh? After an easy ride, we arrive in Grimforge, which is full of these dark dwarves, and one of them is abusing these poor oxen. So I wild shape into an ox and talk to them, trying to convince them to unleash their rage against their captors. We lead the Rothe rebellion to victory, then head over to the forge where some animated constructs are situated. There are torches nearby, so we can use the Path of Fire strategy, but eventually we run out of fire and need to use Call Lightning, which is equally if not more powerful anyway. Now is the final challenge. We need to craft some adamantite to lure out the boss. Grim is immune to every kind of damage except for like force and bludgeoning, both of which I don't really have access to. But if you open the lava gate and Grim steps in the lava, he becomes superheated, which adds more vulnerabilities, but more importantly, the ability to smash him underneath the forge press. Luckily, I have access to the level 3 spell, Fly, which gives me tons more mobility to be where I want to be within one turn, avoid stepping in the lava, and not using any actions while doing so to save my action to interact with the lever and the gate. Getting Grim hit by the forge the first time isn't hard, but then you need to superheat him again and some imps spawn, so it gets a bit more complicated. The imps will actually fight the boss if you aren't nearby, so flying away forces the boss to take out the imps, which gives me time to go for the gate valve again. Unfortunately, I'm not able to survive, but now we know that it's doable. So next attempt, I go for the lava into the forge immediately. The boss gets nuked for half its health, then I fly to the opposite side of the platform to let the boss handle the imps. But the boss knocks me down, and I can't get away because I've had my movement reduced, and I get taken out. If you aren't willing to sit there and reload the game over and over, then a lone wolf challenge might not be for you. Those load screens are quite a tax, to be honest. Eventually, I'm able to get a perfect run with some good RNG. That's it? It was just 2 hits? Sure, there are faster or more impressive ways to do this challenge than how I did, but it's about the journey, not the destination. And being optimal is more about how much fun you have, and if the challenge you are trying to create is simplified by the meta strategies, then is that really the most optimal fun? This is sort of what being a lone wolf devolves into. You get caught up in using the most optimal strategies, and it's difficult to just forget what they are, so you can once again enjoy the journey of discovering how to overcome a conflict. Even though using a single character forced me to engage more with the systems of the game, it forced me to use the most powerful ones, which often resulted in the same strategies being used every time. So would I suggest a lone wolf run? Once again, I think a 4-person party is more fun, even though it's less challenging, because it allows you to play different things and test out the classes and builds for them, instead of just sticking to the most optimal strategy every time, which might not even involve using your class's strengths at all. But that's up to you to decide. If you did enjoy this video, please give a like and share it to others. And if you want more Baldur's Gate 3 content, subscribe. And I'll see you all next time.